Hello, everyone. Welcome to week seven, I believe, week seven. This week, we are going to be learning about marine invertebrates, which I'm excited about because that's one of my favorite topics is marine invertebrates. I think they are so cool. So we're gonna split this lecture into two parts. We'll also be learning some more about marine invertebrates this lab this week. So this week we're going to cover the first part, and then next week we'll cover the second part. So just as a refresher, because we're going to be talking about some phylogenetic groups today. Remember phylogeny, that's when we group species based on their evolutionary relatedness. Uh, we organize things from larger, less specific categories. So things like domains, where we have eukarya, which are like all cells that are large and a little more complex in terms of like the organelles they have. And then we have like all bacteria in a kingdom and all archaea in a kingdom. Sorry, a domain. Then we have kingdoms, things like plantae, uh, animalia, fungi. Uh, but today we're mostly going to be talking about phyla, which is the plural of phylum, and classes. So those are the two main groups we're going to be talking about today. Move my little window up. So how do we actually decide how to split these animals up into these groups? Uh, one way, uh, One way, of course, is by using that we use very often now is by analyzing their DNA and analyzing how much DNA they have in common. And then if they have more DNA in common, presumably they're more related. But we also officially do it through seeing how many different traits they have in common. So some of the things we look for are what type of tissues do they have, how many different types, and what are they? We also look at body symmetry, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. But the two main types we're going to talk about today are radial symmetry, which is basically where you could basically, if you look at the animal from a certain angle, you could cut it like a pizza, and every pizza slice would kind of have be similar to each other. Bilateral symmetry, that is where, sorry, my cats are acting up. Hi, baby. That is where you can split an animal down the middle and both halves are pretty similar. So for example, we are bilaterally symmetrical because you split down the middle, you got like an eye on each side, you got an arm on each side, you got a leg on each side. So we are bilaterally symmetrical. We're also going to talk about whether different species have a body cavity or not. So body cavity is an internal space where your organs can be located. So we actually have several body cavities. We have like the cavity that our lungs and heart sits in. We have the cavity that our like intestines and stomach and liver and stuff sit in. So we actually have several body cavities, but not all animals do have a body cavity. So that's another thing we're going to look at. And of course, the presence or absence of certain structures we're going to look for as well. So, for example, yeah. So, for example, if we're talking about like invertebrates versus vertebrates, so animals that are in the subclass vertebrata, I believe is what it is, are animals that have a spine. So that's the structure that defines that group. Is animals that have a spine are vertebrates. Mm. So this is a little phylogenetic tree of some of the different of kind of animals. So you can see we have a lot of different groups here. We have like Porifera, Cnidaria, Ctenophora, and this is also showing different traits that you find within these groups. So this can actually be helpful for studying as well. Because for example, you can see that both Cnidaria and Ctenophora have radial symmetry, for example. Um, you see that Platyhelminthes does not have a body cavity, whereas all the species down here do have a body cavity. And a chordata, which is all the way down here, would be like where we belong. So all the rest of these guys are invertebrates. Today, we're going to be focusing on this half of this phylogenetic tree, looking at some of the more simplistic animals, and then moving on to the more complex animals next week. Another thing we're going to talk about are feeding strategies, because often species within a certain group will all have similar feeding strategies, which is part of the reason their bodies all look similar. Though not always, sometimes you'll have very different feeding strategies within one, group. So suspension feeding. This is feeding on particulate organic matter that is suspended in the water. There's two main ways you do this. There is passive suspension feeding, This is where basically you're just kind of holding out your appendages and waiting for stuff to land on them and then like eating it and then waiting and eating it and waiting and eating it and waiting. On the other hand, the more active version of suspension feeding is filter feeding. This is where you're still getting your stuff out of the water, but instead you're actually pumping water through your body in order to filter out particles a little faster than just like waiting for them to fall on you. So filter feeding is kind of the more active version of suspension feeding. Then the other type is deposit feeding. This is feeding on particulate organic matter that settles on the bottom. So often this will involve actually eating sediment and like your digestive system filters out all the organic stuff and then you just poop out like the sand on the other end. So a lot of worms and also things like sea cucumbers do this where they just kind of eat sediment, take out the good stuff and poop out the rest. So that is deposit feeding. There are, of course, other ways of eating too, but these are a lot of the ones we're going to talk about with invertebrates. So, kingdom Animalia. This, of course, is the animals. You can split them into two big groups, vertebrates and invertebrates. However, this is a very kind of anthrocentric or vertebrate-centric way of thinking about animals, because vertebrates are just one small group of animals. The vast majority of animals are not vertebrates. So it'd be kind of like if you were talking about all food and you said, so you have two groups of food, oranges and non-oranges, right? That would be kind of a silly way of describing food, but that's kind of what we're doing when we talk about vertebrates and invertebrates. So of course we are vertebrates, which is why we care about them so much. But invertebrates are 97% of animal species are invertebrates. Um, and of course, vertebrates are animals that have a backbone, a spine, those bones that go down the back, our backs. And invertebrates do not have a backbone. So, first question for you guys today. I want you to come up with two vertebrate animals, the ones that do have a backbone, and two invertebrate animals, animals that don't have a backbone. When coming up with invertebrates, it can help to also think of animals that like don't have any kind of like bony skeleton at all. So, go ahead and try to come up with those below.